deeper connection with their ancestors, as well as want to support healing unwellness and burdening and intergenerational trauma on their line. And in that practice, one of the first things people often say is, well, how do I know I'm not making all of this up? And for me, I say, well, let's see what happens in your life. Like, there's no better evidence than the truth of your experience. Like, if you're making all of this up, then nothing will change in your life. Nothing will change about how you feel about it. Nothing will change in your relationships with your family. Like, nothing will be any different. But if this was legit, it will improve your own sense of well-being. It will shift your own sense of purpose in life. It will shift your sense of presence in your life. It will shift the relationship dynamics and the well-being of people in your family. And that's what my clients experience, is those shifts. And so they wind up saying, I don't know if it's made up or not, but I'm going to keep doing it. You know, like when people talk about placebo effect, one, I think it's always interesting because I'm like, no one's ever really interested in why placebo effect works for some people and not for others. I find that fascinating. But two, no one ever seems interested in them like, well, if a sugar pill can work, let's figure out how to make the sugar pill work for everybody. Like, why take a chemical if we don't have to? So for me, I've witnessed enough of the impact of my relationships with God and the ancestors in my life to where I don't experience, I would say, the same kind of doubt that maybe someone who hasn't had a deep enough practice would experience. And I will sometimes tell people, like, you know, you would believe what I believe if you lived the life that I live.
What is a message that you've gotten from the ancestors that you're like, okay, I don't get it, but okay, I'm asking for a friend? No.
One of the most recent ones, and I still don't totally get it, but I was talking with a friend to help me get it more. One of the most recent ones, my ancestors told me to buy purple glasses. Yeah, buy purple. I bought them. The viewers can't see, but you can see. I bought them, all right? And I do wear glasses, but typically I'm a like brown, black kind of person. I don't really get too funky with my glasses. And so when they were like, buy purple glasses, I was like, I don't wear purple glasses. Like, that's not me. And the only thing that he said was, I need you to let go of who you think you are right now. So I bought the purple glasses, and I'm going to wear the purple glasses. I have a little bit more understanding of why the purple glasses, but I still really don't get it. But I'm trusting it. You know, I'm trusting the role that it's going to play in this next journey of my life. I know I'm at a really big transition right now, and I know that whenever you transition, who you need to be in that new place is going to be different than who you are right now. So maybe I'll come back on the podcast when it's like super clear what the glasses are for and be like, y'all never would have guessed this.
This is what happened. I'm like, Lauryn Hill's going to see you in those purple glasses, right, and y'all are going to get to talking, and you're going to go on tour.
Listen. Don't laugh, Shauna. Listen. That's the way it happens, though, in my life. Legit. So, you know, hey, Lauren, like, right. I got the purple glasses. I got them.
It's incredible what you're sharing, because it's so simple sometimes, the messages that we are meant to follow on the path to our legacy, or the things we're meant to pay attention to, or what our body does, right? And sometimes we're like waiting for the big moment, right? The big unveil. And it can be so simple sometimes. It's like, no, left instead of right? Or like purple glasses instead of the brown ones. And what I hear you saying is, like, sometimes it's those things that take us on a new path of possibility towards our legacies.
Yeah. One of the biggest shifts I made in consciousness, this was maybe a year ago, I always sort of noticed these kind of patterns in my life. Like, I noticed something seemingly random, like I don't know, a horse on a flyer. And then maybe the next day, the horse in a TV show would jump out at me. And then maybe the next day, I'd hear a song called Horse Lovers or something like that. And then I'd end up having some experience or meeting someone important who had a horse t-shirt on, right? Like, I always noticed little patterns like that throughout my experience. And one day I decided I was going to actually start to track. And so I literally had a journal. I called it my pattern journal. And anytime something stood out to me, I would write it down. Even if it hadn't happened again, if it just stood out to me in whatever mode, I would write it down. And I started to end up tracking these patterns. And again, I wouldn't know why the pattern was there. I didn't try to figure out what they're trying to tell me. I just would track them. And eventually, it would be revealed. I remember one distinct time, I kept waking up and hearing bells. And there ain't no bells in my house. But I kept waking up and hearing bells for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then at the end of that 2 or 3 weeks, I ended up getting this client whose last name was Bell. And so when I did that, and I was able to see on paper the alchemy that Spirit is engaging in, that God is engaging in, I was like, oh shit, like this is deep. And it was small things, and it's always small things. God can use anything. Your soul can use anything and is often using everything in your life. Somebody right now, I swear to you, somebody right now got a spoon that been sitting on their kitchen floor underneath the stove for months that God is using. Like right now. And I don't know, maybe you're supposed to work with me, maybe you need to hit up Shauna, but whoever you are, and you probably noticed it this morning while you was eating your oatmeal, and you looked at it, you was like, why don't I just pick up that spoon? I've been looking at that spoon under the stove forever, and I won't just pick it up. What is wrong with me? This is why you didn't pick it up. Right here, right now, is why you didn't pick it up. And so God is using everything. The soul is using everything in our lives to communicate with us. It's just a matter of, are we paying attention to what gets our attention? That's what some people think you have to put forth a lot of effort to see it. You don't. All you've got to do is pay attention to what is already getting your attention. I forget the statistics, but, you know, there's something like, I don't know, we see like 5 billion pieces of information or whatever in our lifetimes or something like that, but we only store a certain percentage of it, right? So we only have a capacity to take in so much, which means we block out everything out. All of that is divine making. We're literally designed to block out specific things at specific moments. So what gets your attention is of sacred value. So paying attention to that, paying attention to those patterns, again, without trying to create a story, allows you to be in deeper relationship with all these small, big, tiny ways that Spirit is always speaking and affirming for us and guiding for us what's happening. My current partner, her name is Nicola. Shout out to Nicola. And before I met her, I was talking to a friend. And my friend knew me, I think maybe 6 or 7 years. So knew me when I was married. And was saying something about my ex-wife and called her Nicole. Now, my ex-wife's name is not Nicole. It's nowhere close to Nicole. Not even close. And as soon as she said it, she said, why did I say that? I know that's not her name. And I said, I don't know why you said it. But I wrote it down in my pattern journal. Right? And then not too long after that, I meet my current partner. So there's always evidence present. There's always preparation present. And lots of time, it's small. It's the things we would never suspect.
Everybody just ran out and got a pattern journal, by the way. Do you have you this is something you got to create, right? Because like I'm going to be looking for Jamari's pattern journal. You heard it here first. What I hear you saying is like, pay attention, to sometimes to wake up and pay attention is the thing that you've been waiting Dang, Jamari, you've been preaching. So I want to play back to you some of the things, some of the divine lessons that I think you've shared with me. And I'm sure there are going to be a million more as people listen to your words and as you provoke thought. And as reciprocity, here's what I heard you say today that I'm going to carry with me. One of them is the will to be still. The others is to listen. Like, you just listen and you'd be surprised what you hear. I'm remembering the pattern journal and to follow. And as leaders, sometimes I'm conditioned to lead, and following is profoundly scary. You said you know who you are, and dang, we're told all day we don't know, right? Even when people are trying to help, go get self-care, go read this book, you know who you are. And there's something really simple about that is elegant and profound. And you said what gets your attention is of sacred value. And so thank you for those pieces of wisdom.
Thank you for reflecting on that, Sean. I just love your presence. Let me say, I need the people to know, I literally am just meeting Shauna today.
It's
you
true.
Are so dope, and your energy is so powerful, and your wisdom is palpable. Even though you've been interviewing me, right? Like, the wisdom in your brain is so energetically palpable and here and transformational. I'm so blessed to be here today.
Thank you. Well, you shared with us one lyric. Is there another lyric that comes to mind that you're like, this one about my legacy is the one that I want the people to hear?
You know, I know that this life in particular and my work with Soul Stewards is a commission, probably one of my greatest commissions as a spirit being. And it has taken so much. Like, I think we've shared a drop of it here on this podcast. There's so many stories within the stories within the stories within the stories. But I was on Instagram and there was an artist, I'm forgetting their name right now, but there is an artist who, it's not even a song I think they had out, it was just like them kind of riffing. But in it they said, use me until there's nothing left to take. And it was a sort of worship song. And that really lands for me. I don't want to leave here feeling like I took all my gifts, all my wisdom, all my knowledge with me. I want to leave here feeling like I gave it all and I left it all and other people can use it all. You know, some folks feel a lot of ownership over their legacy. I don't feel like my legacy is for me. Like, my legacy is for who comes next. It's what they'll do with it. And I hope they make it better. I hope they transmute it. I hope, you know, all of those things. And so I just want to leave everything here. And that lyric really sums it up. You know, I'm a willing vessel for that. And I think for some folks, why they struggle or can struggle in their leadership is it's hard sometimes to embody that level of surrender and release, and to say, you know, I am doing this work, I am showing up in this position, or I am leading this thing, but it's not about me, actually. And the more I can be generous, that's why I feel like my real legacy is generosity. The more I can be generous with my heart and my work, the greater my legacy will be.
Where can we find you, Jamari?
You can find me at www.soulstewards.org. You can also find me on Instagram, on the gram, at Soul Stewards as well. You know, you can find me in the ethos, like drop in, say what's up. You know, and if you want to connect, maybe you can find me in your city. I love working with folks, doing awesome things.
Thank you for spending time, for dropping knowledge bombs and wisdom, and for feeding our souls. Thanks for today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for feeding me. I mean, I needed this conversation myself. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to Legacy, Lyrics, and Life. We hope you'll join us on the next episode as we continue to expand and explore life, through legacy. If you know someone else who would enjoy the show, be sure to share. Always a pleasure. Until next time. Hey y'all, you're listening to the Legacy, Lyrics, and Life podcast. I'm your host, Shauna Wells, your legacy architect. Welcome. This is the podcast where we'll uncover what legacy really means and the impact we can all have when we are present. Let's get started. All right, y'all, I'm here with Patrick Jones, one of my favorite homies. So I'm glad to have you here because you're like the brother I never had on legacy and conversation, and a brilliant mind. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Do I get a pew, pew, pew? There we go.
A little air horn.
Yes.
I have not gotten the update most recently on what is the legacy that you are aligning toward.
In the broadest sense, it is to give back to my community. When I say community, I mean the Black community, in a way that provides sustainable change in the positive direction, right? And the way I do that now is through math education and through a scholarship fund that me and my family run. And so from a math education perspective, I was a math teacher, computer science major when I was in school. And in working in some of those spaces, I do see the barriers that math is. And I think a lot of times in education, this isn't necessarily Black education, but in education, we pretend that math is not a barrier. We tell kids like, hey, you can be an engineer, you can be this, and you can be that. And we don't like get them the type of actual math training that they need. Now, that's just a large swath of the U.S. population, right? But in addition to that, in the Black population, we are really not in tune with what it takes and the resources that are in place to get kids to this level. And what I mean by that is math competitions. And competition math is the predominant problem-solving mechanism that folks use to get into those spaces. Coding competitions and things of that nature. Because of the types of problems that are asked in those spaces are the things that get you ready. And so I have a goal that I've just taken on that I am going to impact my community by creating joy around math, creating opportunities to train around math, creating opportunities to master mathematics, and then creating opportunities to create new knowledge around math. And I want to start with predominantly K through 3 students, but I provide joy opportunities for K through 5. And the resource we do that with is a property we call Exponential Prime. It started as a storybook of a Black girl who is a phenomenal mathematician, and she can travel between math worlds. And it's an amazing story. We have book 2 possibly coming out this school year. We have an expansion to the Exponential Prime world dropping this August. And that story is called The Quantum Slugger. It's about a young man who plays baseball who invents different ways for baseball bats to exist so they can hit more home runs. And he uses physics to do so. So kids learn about angles and exit velocity and things of that nature. And so we want to make sure we're giving kids opportunities to have joy around math. We believe, and I believe, and I've seen students react to this, that learning that starts with joy is sustainable. But if it's devoid of training, that's when we have a situation where kids really don't have the skills to move on to the next level of that particular topic. So there has to be joy to get kids in a sustainable place where they can say, I want to do this. And then we get to training where it is a particular skill. It is a gift for some people, but for most people, it is a skill that has to be trained. And then we master that skill. And then we move that mastery to creation of new knowledge. And so Exponential Prime is that thing. The other thing is my wife and I are both graduates of Fisk University. We went to an HBCU. We're big proponents of HBCU spaces. And so we have $1,000 scholarship that we give to an Indianapolis resident who is heading to an HBCU. We give 2 out per year. And if I were to put another tag in here, everything has to be strategic from a standpoint where you connect multiple pieces to your dream, right? Your legacy can't exist in and of itself. And so my kids are on the board of this nonprofit, of the scholarship fund. So we literally have retreats and meetings where my kids have to make decisions on who gets the scholarship. They have to read the essays. They have to understand the backgrounds, understand what colleges they go to. And in Exponential Prime, we hire young people through the summer to create math items for some of our books. We have 3 young people working for us right now. And then we also have events called math circles. And math circles are really quite common in competition math spaces. And so we create math circles for K through 5. And that's our joy activity. And we hire middle and high school students to help work those events, teach them leadership skills of, what it means to get a kid interested or show a kid how to play a game. It's a family event, so parents are there with the kids who are at the event. So they're also like working with the parents. They're running the prize tables. And so that's all a part of the legacy. Everybody has to be involved.
I mean, what I love about you, Patrick, is that you've built this ecosystem around the legacy that you're aiming to leave, right? You've involved your children, you've involved community members. So Patrick is in Indianapolis. It's like he's the mayor, right? And like there's this element that you talk about, the unique trait you have is joy, right? Like there's this element of joy just about how you are aligning to and living through your legacy. And so I have so much curiosity around what it felt like when you discovered your legacy.
That joy thing has been curious because I don't think I've always been there as a math teacher or parent. And I say that to say, like, my own kids don't want to learn math from me. But they will go to the math circle and work the math circle and walk away saying things like, Dad, that was actually pretty fun. Like, that was good. And I'm like, man, how come I don't get responses like that as a parent? And I get to contemplate on, like, I get to, like, adjust my parenting. Like, man, I want to have more joy with my kids too. But what I recognized is joy has to be a part of our journey here, because what we can't do is just train. And I say that because I learned this from actually other cultures. When I talk to folks who are primarily immigrants to this country and they get involved in math competitions. So folks from India, folks from China typically these folks, the folks that I talk to, live in affluent parts of the city because they're generally engineers and their kids are involved in these math competitions. I'm asking them about their experience because I want Black kids to have the experience that some of their kids are having. So I'm trying to replicate some of this stuff. And I'm asking them, how are they getting their kids involved? And they use many of the techniques that I would use as a parent. Like, kids got to do it. They got to sit at the table and do it. You can't, you got to have dedicated time. It's very structured, right? And what I realized is this: it wasn't that the time was structured. It wasn't that they were diehards for this stuff, right? This is very important. Nothing else is more important. Like, I know Black families like that. It wasn't just that. What it was it was in the culture. That was the difference. It was in the culture. We just become doctors. It's kind of like Black people love music. Like, Black people love soul music. That's in our culture. This idea that these groups of people were engineers or doctors or good at math was a part of their culture. It was not an innate thing. It was something that had been embedded in them over the generations for whatever reason, right? We can say it's because when you're part of an immigrant culture, you come to another country to make it, give yourself an opportunity, then it becomes a part of your culture. However it became a part of their culture, it was a part of their culture. And so then my thinking became to be, well, how do I create math as an opportunity to be a part of our culture? How do we make it so that it's in the water? And I'm not saying everybody has to be an engineer. What I am saying is that this fear around math that exists in our households, that exists in our lineage, has got to go, because it is such a barrier to becoming a part of the nation that is so sustainable. When we look at technological advances in our country, we look at who owns now a lot of those patents. who owns a lot of the technology, who gets to make decisions around a lot of the technology, who owns medicine, who owns financial services. If we're talking about equity, this conversation has got to move beyond, are there black kids that are pictured in the school cafeteria? I want to talk about, do we control financial institutions?
Let's talk about that. So what makes that important to this legacy?
I mean, my journey has been long with that. The first book I read around thinking that black people needed to control their own destinies was really like speeches and thoughts of Marcus Garvey, right? Thinking like Africa is for the Africans and just ideology around that. And then I read a book by Dr. Claude Anderson called Powernomics, essentially stating that, you know, races in this country are in a pretty much a competition is kind of how he describes it. I don't know if I subscribe to that wholeheartedly, but I do think there is something to be said for, you know, our group is historically at least past a certain level where, you know, blacks were the highest, were the fastest gain of literacy of any other group in American history, the fastest gain of numeracy of any other group in American history, post-slavery. But after a certain time, that has all stopped. So I'm looking at this, and like, while I don't subscribe wholeheartedly to this idea of competition, I do see that if it is a competition, we are grossly losing and unprepared. And then I read The Blueprint for Black Power by Dr. Amos Wilson, and he starts identifying power structures. He starts identifying particular power pillars, I guess, if you will, in a similar way Dr. Anderson does, but his research seems to be more in depth. He particularly talks about the role of power in all of this and the role of leadership. And one of the things I thought about in reading some of these is like money is one of the things. And I think a lot of times we focus on money and financial institutions. But the role of financial institutions honestly has nothing to do with money. When you talk about math, you need the mathematical skills to understand like how to play the game, because the game gets a little complex. You need people to predict and, you know, do all the things. But what I noticed is the role of the money in the financial institutions was really about power. And that's what got me thinking. It's like, oh man, if we don't start controlling the preparation for some of this, then we don't prepare our kids for power. We don't even prepare our kids to work in the systems that have the tools of managing the power. We're just subjects at that point. And that's where, like, when you get deeper and deeper and deeper, that's what really drives this, right? This Africa for the Africans mentality, right? Even Africa is not for the Africans right now. And certainly African-American communities are not for the African-Americans. And so then how do we change any of that? And some of it was with money and having capital. You gotta have those things, right? But those are the tools. So then what lies underneath that? All types of other things. Social capital, preparation. Do you have people with the know-how? And I look at my role as an educator in life, and how do I play my part? I was really good at teaching kids math. So how do I become the catalyst there is the question I have for myself.
This is fascinating, right? Because we have all of these things that inform our legacy. And you've picked up words from other people, right? You've thought about and like they pushed you to think about ideas like power, which frankly we're not taught to think about. And you talk about this idea of tools. Like, why is it compelling to you? Like, what is speaking to you about this idea of power and legacy?
One of the things I think about when I think about the word legacy is, I mean, quite frankly, and this is, you can consider this like an egotistical statement, but like, what type of stamp do I want to have on the world? What do I want my grandkids to think about, right? I'm extremely proud of my parents. My mom literally would dig in trash cans behind our elementary school to make sure we had things. She stocked our library with free books that schools threw away. We had whole encyclopedia sets at home, and I would straight up read them because I'm a bit of a nerd, Shauna, right? And so, like, the thing that I think about is my mom literally started volunteering at the cafeteria of my brother's school and would literally bring home school lunches, and we would eat those for dinner a lot of nights. Long story short, she got a job working in the cafeteria and became like a school security kind of person, like the person that used to walk around the school making sure kids do what they're supposed to do. And then she ended up becoming a 911 operator for Compton School Police. and she just retired from that. But I say all that to say, like, that's the legacy that she left for me and my kids. And so when my son is doubting himself or is not doing everything he needs to do in school, the conversation immediately goes to, your grandmother is not busting her behind. Like, you ought to know where you come from. Not to mention, my mother is from Tulsa, Oklahoma originally. And her mother is from Tulsa. And her mother is from Tulsa. So when you talk about even that legacy, boy and girl for my daughter, you will do everything to make your lineage proud, because they've just been through too much for you to, like, squander this. And I understand, like, there are life's growing pains. My father is from Galveston, Texas, the last place to hear that the African-American peoples in those communities were no longer enslaved, which means, like, he's been celebrating Juneteenth since before I was born. And I remember him, telling stories about, yeah, we used to go to Texas in the summertime. So it's odd to see the country, like, making the tide. And I'm not sure how I feel about it exactly, because that means also it's becoming a commercialized holiday. I always have thoughts about that. And I also get to let those feelings go and just enjoy. Yeah, just, thinking about what my father went to the Navy. He was the first person in his family to graduate from high school. He was mathematically gifted. He became a jet mechanic in the Navy, traveled all over the world, and met my mom. But he always instilled this idea of a love of math being cool, it being good for you to be good at math. Like, there was a culture in our household. He moved back to Galveston before he passed. And before he passed, he went back to school and he got his bachelor's degree in mathematics. And at his funeral, I was pretty much, like, looking around, and they were, like, all these 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds. I'm like, who are these people? I didn't know where they were from. And I started asking them, like, hey, how do you know my dad? And he went to Texas Southern University. I was like, how do you know my dad? They said, I went to TSU with your dad, and he used to tutor us through our math classes. And to see him creating his own legacy, I know that my hopes, dreams, desires are in there, and that's what drives it. But it's also a carrying on of the torch of my parents' legacies as well. It's all embedded in there. Because I believe, our desires, our hopes, our legacies are this thread that we're, like, casting out into this fabric, this weave that we're all making, right? And I tell people all the time, I didn't come up with this idea. It's a guy named Brian Swim. He's basically like, after we cast all of these desires, these threads, it creates this fabric that we can all uplift humanity with. And that's what's really important to me. I have to do my part. If I don't do my part, we all fall.
What's beautiful about it is, like, this moment, you and I on this podcast talking, is the result of a millennia of decisions that have been made by our ancestors to bring us here in this moment, to weave together everything you talk about, right? And so what I'm hearing you say is, okay, it was my parents that really helped to form my legacy. They built this community, this culture, this conversation, and the actions that were connected to it. My mom in her way, and my dad in his way. And I'm informed by a set of deep practitioners who gave us the gift of writing, right, to see what they're thinking, to inform my own legacy. And now the legacy I'm living today is also informed by my children, by my community, by the things that I choose to take up. And so, Patrick, maybe as, like, a last thought exercise here, what are the things that seemed contrary to your legacy, but really affirmed this is actually the legacy I'm aiming to leave?
That's a tough one. And I say that's tough, and I'm going to answer it, but I do want to explain why I say it's tough. It's tough because I've been learning to live in possibility, which means nothing could be against my legacy. It's another iteration. It's an additional color to the thread, is all it seems like. A no really is like another branch masquerading as a no, right? It's really a yes that just looks different. And some of the things that have been contrary to the dream is, like, one, Exponential Prime started off as a book. And it's just like, it started off as one thing, and I want to sell books, and I really work hard to sell books, but it's really about creating this culture. And I think like whatever I have to do that is what I'm going to do. So that might be math circles. Say something else springs up and that's how I choose to do it, then like I can abandon the math circles, because it's really about creating the culture, and I'm open to that. Or do the math circles and the other thing. Whatever the universe sends my way to create a culture of math love and achievement with our people is what will happen. And so I think like it's hard to see the book as a barrier, but I think that's almost one example, because it's so much bigger than a book. A book is one mechanism to get the job done.
I love this example, right? Because the book, you've heard me say this about BS for Black Brilliance, the book is just an agitation tool, right? Like, surprise y'all, it's not about the book, right? It is about a conversation that, as you're talking about, needs to be woven into our culture, right? We expect that you will honor our brilliance. We expect that you will say, America's next physicians will be Black, right? Or America's next mathematicians will be Black. We expect that, right? And as we expect it becomes. And this idea of it's all about possibility. And if I get confused about focusing on the book instead of focusing on the legacy, I'm going to miss out. And so it's a beautiful articulation, Patrick, of helping all of us understand sometimes the thing in front of us isn't actually the legacy we're aiming to leave. And if we can get clear on like, this is the thing I came to do, then it helps us make decisions around possibility and abundance that are beyond our wildest dreams and our ancestors' wildest dreams, period, right? Your mom did not have the time to think about legacy beyond her children, right? This generation, we get to do that. That's the gift been handed. And we're going to either do something with it or we're not. So thank you for taking those bars. Okay, so tell us, I've been curious the whole time because I know that you are steeped in music. What's a lyric or a set of lyrics that has informed your legacy or speaks to you about your legacy right now, today?
It's got to be a set of lyrics. But anyway, so I'd say, so the first is Kendrick Lamar. It's from a song called The Heart Part 3. He always talks about being compared to Pac all the time, Tupac. And he writes, when the whole world see you as Pac reincarnated, that's enough pressure to live your whole life sedated. Find the tallest building in Vegas and jump off it, but I could never rewrite history from a coffin. And that line is one of the reasons why it's one of my favorites. Because it was like his real first foray into the mainstream, that album. Which means some of that pressure he was feeling, I have to be successful on this album. And the pressure is thick, but I have to play big because I can't live out my legacy, rewrite history from a coffin. And so it just reminds me of those times where you've been through this, I hire a graphic designer, that don't work out, or I hired this person, or I tried this and that didn't work. When those times get hard and that pressure gets thick, that's not the time to give up, because you can't do what you set out to do by giving up. Outcast, Liberation. It's one of my favorite songs, and just because of this line, I can't worry about what another brother think. That's liberation, and baby, I want it. Right? And sometimes people are going to be naysayers. It's just one of those things. You're going to have naysayers. You're going to have people who don't believe in your dream, and that's okay. You need a little tension to cast your thread, right? It doesn't always work freely. The loom needs to fight against something, going back and forth.
I appreciate you, and I have learned so much in talking to you and in our lifetime together. So I am glad to be a part of the fabric of your legacy, and I'm glad you are part of mine. Thank you. Where can we find you, Patrick, if we're looking for your genius, your wisdom, your math culture? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so we're on Instagram at Exponentia Prime. So a lot of people will say exponential. So it's exponential without the L. Exponentia Prime, and www.exponentiaprime.com.
We appreciate you, Patrick. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Shauna. Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to Legacy, Lyrics, and Life. We hope you'll join us on the next episode as we continue to expand and explore life through legacy. If you know someone else who would enjoy the show, be sure to share. Always a pleasure. Until next time. Hey, y'all, you're listening to the Legacy, Lyrics, and Life podcast. I'm your host, Shauna Wells, your legacy architect. Welcome. This is the podcast where we'll uncover what legacy really means and the impact we can all have when we are present. Let's get started. Okay, y'all, welcome back. I have the opportunity today to talk to my sister, my friend, a dear colleague in the work of striving for a legacy-aligned life. She is the founder and CEO of the Highland Project, and she is much more than that. She is a sister, she is a partner, she's an auntie, and she believes in building generational wealth for Black women. And I'm honored to call her my friend. So, Gabby, welcome to the show.
Hey, Shauna, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good.
Good. Tell me one thing that's bringing you joy right now.
I have a commitment to myself to twice a month. I have a writing and strategy Wednesday, which means no meetings, internal or external. And these aren't my strategy work blocks. I need to work on fundraising, but rather really with a goal being generative and creative. And so today is Friday. I had my first writing Wednesday this week, and it was just beautiful. And it was beautiful because I feel like it was a culmination of putting together my learnings of what taps into my creativity. And so instead of sitting at my desk all day being write, Gabrielle, I started with movement. I wrote a little bit. I went into the park. I changed scenes. I went to a coffee shop, did some yoga. And who knows if what I wrote will ever see the light of day. But it was so generative. And yesterday, in a meeting I was having with my team members, so many of them just kept saying, you have so many ideas today. You seem really refreshed today. And so it was a nice midweek pause to just collect myself and collect my dreams, whether they were about today or 100 years from now. I'm feeling that energy today. It has stuck with me.
Yeah. I love the intentionality behind that. And as with most conversations we have, I think they're meant to be. Because yesterday I went down this rabbit hole on daydreaming. And I just read a research study that says that, first of all, most of us spend about 40% of our time daydreaming, which is, I think, hard to believe. I'm no, I spent all my time thinking about what's next. And the power of when you spend time intentionally daydreaming, so you've carved out the time to just really look around, go for a walk, realize your surroundings, that the next days are actually some of the most productive for people. I just think it's a remarkable. Also, what are the odds that I read that study yesterday and then used it? So, Gabby, tell us, I love to watch you live your legacy. It's one of my favorite things. So tell us the journey of your legacy.
You're making me blush and feel oddly self-conscious. I am in a moment where I feel a lot of ease in my life, that everything's perfect. Over my winter rest break, I just had a realization that every Black woman, I believe, sits on the edge of an emergent future that we deeply internalize, but the only constant is change. And I think that when we know we're in stride with our legacy is when we feel like we're sitting on the edge. And we're sitting on that edge still. We're sitting on that edge in community. And we're sitting on that edge not trying to change. And that's where I feel like I am right now. I feel like I started to step into my legacy from before I was born. I often would say to my mom, when I was in God's pocket, I heard, but I know that what my ancestors, including my modern day ancestors, seeded in me was a love for community. That is the Wyatt legacy. I grew up with my parents always having their neighbors over for the holidays. Even when they divorced, we brought together our families, and to this day, it is a merged family that's large at the holidays. It's that family that will ask you if you need a friend to come join you, or will take in that friend who doesn't have a place to go. And I was born into a family with a deep love for public service and a deep love, more specifically, frankly, for loving on the brilliance of Black and brown kids. Everyone in my family, my immediate family, is an educator. I'm the youngest, as Shauna, of 3 girls, and as the youngest, I do go to the beat of my own drum. And I knew I wanted to continue my family's legacy, but I wasn't really sure how. I really enjoyed play. I really enjoyed being a ham and creativity. I grew up in the arts. But I feel like the first legacy intervention or nudge I had was because of an educator and an artist. The artist was the late Bertolt Brecht, who was a Holocaust survivor. And he created Brechtian theater, a type of theater that was meant to make you so uncomfortable you'd leave to perform a political act. And I was in high school in my actor neutral every single day at a magnet school that was an hour from home. And I started to really realize where I was owed to go to high school. And frankly, I was pissed. I wanted to get up in the middle of the show and leave because I just knew I was going to be all right if I didn't go there. And I felt really guilty about, did I take a seat from someone else from my community who deserved it more than me? And I had an educator who said, why don't you use your voice and do something with it? So we don't even have SG at our school. Like, this is such a granola, crunchy thing. We don't even do that. But I did it. I ran for state student member. I got to the final 2. I wasn't appointed. I ran again for Baltimore County Board that same year, got appointed, and it began a journey of never looking back. There was one of the first Black male superintendents in the district who really deeply valued that I truly had voting rights and my voice. And it was really probably the first example I saw of someone co-powering and ceding power to youth voice, and most specifically to Black voice. And that really began to set me on a path of what does it mean to create a life where what I'm leaving behind are deep investments in the brilliance of our voice, in the brilliance of our power as Black people. And then I feel like there were these conveyor belt years that followed. Not that they weren't intentional and not that I don't value the lessons of them, but I think, and you've really helped me to have language for this, Shauna, I think that what occurred post-high school was this constant manifestation of jobs and titles over purpose. And while I know I led purposeful work, and I'm proud of the work that I led in school systems and in foundations, there always was still a piece that didn't feel authentic to me. I think as Black women, our work will always be like so intertwined in everything about who we are and how we move in the world. And yet, my work was and so many parts of little Gabby school board member, Gabby in her actor neutral every day for the majority of her adolescence, they went away. And I think that the journey I began to sit with right before shutdowns in New York was a question of, did I trust my own voice? Did I trust that I too had a vision? And was I willing to lead that vision that I saw for myself? And then I found you.
I'm like, it's coming.
And then I found you. And I found Shauna Wells. But in all seriousness, I really did find Shauna Wells. And it was all because I had an incredible coach, Meg Ansara, at the time, who I think noticed in me this itching to figure out how to trust my voice and how to trust my gut. And so I had a real gift that I know not everyone had during the beginning and the following years of the pandemic, but I had this gift of stillness. I had this gift of trust from the organization I was at the time to begin to explore, frankly, what did I really want as a human and individual. I didn't realize that in full at the time. Instead, I thought about it as, what's the thing I might create to add deeper value to this ecosystem for Black social justice leaders, and more specifically for Black women. But the most beautiful part about that experience was really finding that I really needed all systems. And so my journey into legacy really became being the prototype for what I was trying to create.
But somebody asked me the other day, why did you create Views for Black Brilliance? And I was like, you can read the story. But let me tell you, just in 2 sentences, or just one really, is I created it from the 10-year-old version of myself. And it's evolved since then, right? It is certainly not centered in only my experience. But in the beginning, the question I was asking myself stemmed from the deepest part of me that needed to be seen.
Yes.
That's right. So you said this, like, I was on a series of conveyor belts, and I'm just like picturing these like alternative Gabbies. So do you think you need the conveyor belt moments to discover your ultimate legacy?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, let me play this out as I say this out loud. In the world that I imagine is here 7 generations from now, I don't think you need those moments, because I actually believe that things like legacy curriculums exist in high schools and even lower, right? Lower levels. But when I think about where we are right now, I think those conveyor belt moments shine a mirror for you on what you really enjoy doing and not. I think it shines a mirror on you on the relationships in your life. Are they reciprocal relationships or not? I think they shine a light on, does that organizational budget represent the things you care about or not? There's something to, I believe, how we develop our persistence, frankly, as a Black community. And so with that, I'm naming, I believe that inherent in the conveyor belt is struggle and is adversity. And I think it built in us, it built in me just this like very clear understanding that this conveyor belt wasn't imagined for me. And honestly, I had that click moment. I don't know if it was too late or not, but I had it when 2019 of that click moment. I think from there I became much more generous. I stopped applying or jumping to short-term solutions, but instead really started to say, let me actually decenter whiteness in this, on this conveyor belt, and just imagine the system I want to be in instead. Someone said to me recently, do you really think white people are thinking about you when they're designing their systems? And yet they can take up so much space in the Black and brown line as we design ours. And it really moved me because I think the conveyor belt time taught me how to wield power. It taught me how to be subversive. And I'm really clear I'm using that experience now to imagine the world I want and use those tools to get there, but also be really clear they are not the only tools that exist. Forget them.
I do believe we all have these moments, right, that shape us and that give us the gifts of our future and help us draft what our lives are going to create. And you talk about the moment that you started to realize that you had silenced your voice. Can you take us back to there? What was it like?
Scary as hell. And honestly, it was probably snow, to be honest, to be 100% honest. It probably was like 18 months of snow moments. And then it probably was actually like 5 years of snowballed moments, but it was just, frankly, pattern recognition. So, I'll share, I would say midway through my first act of my career in education systems change, I found myself in incredibly poor health. And I was in a high stress role in a large school district. And my relationships were like so fraught, personally and professionally. And that was my moment when I said, I got to step out of this role. And I moved into a nonprofit and said, I'm going to focus on my wellness. And at that time, wellness to me meant sweat fitness. It was not really thinking about what is my mental health, what is my spiritual health, what's actually going to move me from a state of survival to thriving and feeling nourished. But nevertheless, it did help me get on track to like being a healthier human. And it was a moment of realizing that for my entire life until I stepped into education systems change, I had always been at issues of intersection, and from being in school for the arts to grad school, being with folks who were from so many different sectors. And then all of a sudden I was in this like siloed world. And I realized that didn't pique my curiosity. It didn't push my curiosity. It didn't challenge my thinking anymore. And I realized I deeply was questioning if I was imaginative enough to design solutions on the other side. And so that was scary. But how my antidote for it was coaching. I chained up my coaching bench. I mentioned Meg before. I was like, I got to find a coach who's going to kick my ass and just set up for me a short and simple process to help me to realize what paths I could take. And that also it doesn't have to be a binary path. And she helped unearth in me that my ideas were worthy of being put on paper. And so I remember that first shutdown summer in New York, just writing reams of paper about what I felt was missing for Black women social justice leaders. And I think it was Meg, it was certainly my husband, Jared, who just said, just pitch what you want. And what's the worst that will happen? You hear no. And at least then you have an answer on something of the many questions you're asking. And so that's what I did. I pitched going on, frankly, an exploratory journey and leaving my role. And I pitched that part of that was doing it with you, Shauna, and having you there. I didn't know about this time. Nature continues. And I think that's the thing I want to name for listeners is the greatest challenge that I have in my legacy right now is just because I'm feeling good doesn't mean that I can stop my practices of identifying, am I moving in alignment? Does something need to be shed? Does a mindset of mine need to be shifted? Does a relationship need to end? Yes, you've gotten so far with this re-envisioning or reimagining of your legacy in the last 18 months, but you've got to change up the next set of tools and resources to get you through the next tranche. It is certainly not an uphill battle. I like to think about it as these moments on the highland of realizing you climbed, enjoying it, and then knowing you're going to go back down and come right back up again. And in that down and up, in that liminal space, there's a lot of work that continues. And that top work is that inner work. When I launched Highland, was never comfortable saying the following, and now I'm always saying it, which is everything begins and ends with a sustained Black woman. And last year I just started saying to myself, everything begins and ends with a sustained Gabrielle. And that's that work in that liminal space that does not stop. It doesn't stop to realize your legacy.
Yes. I've said a few times in this conversation and others, I love to watch you live your legacy. And it's the big moments I'm right next to you as a hype crew member. What is beautiful about watching you live your legacy, it's those big moments when all of the things are happening and we're excited about the next cohort. But it's also how you write in your notebook. It's how you doodle. Gabrielle doodles, right? And she doesn't use the lines on the page. It's all of the ways that you have accepted who you are becoming. And I know that seems silly, but it's what you choose to wear, and it's how you choose to show up, and it's what you choose to say yes to and no to. So I wonder, what are the small things that you've realized help you live your legacy and help you live in alignment?
The things that help me live in alignment, hands down, I really do take a sleep schedule seriously. I take it extremely seriously, and that's not to sound trite, but you know this about me, Shauna. I love to bend time, and bending time for me means I've always known my entire life on this earth that I love mornings. I'm at my best in the mornings, and so I try to bend time of how can I be really present as the sun comes up and continues to rise. And so I'm an early riser, and that's to do the work of Gabrielle. And that work of Gabrielle, I guess, is piece 2, which is manifesting and living stillness in different ways. I'm a yogi. I'm one who sits in silence, but that's my morning practice. I have a morning gratitude practice, ever small or large. I like to be still in nature. It is pretty rare that a day doesn't go by when I haven't taken a walk without my headphones on to notice what's around me, what chooses to be seen. And I'm a dork about it. I love whether it's a bird or I'm I haven't seen the tree look that way before. I'm going to go look it up, or I'm going to find a book about it, because this thing called Mother Earth is going to be here in some way, shape, or form after me, and she was here before me. And I think there's lessons in that. I think there's lessons in how, when we're at our best, we can pass something on. And when we're not being treated well, we can continue to live and survive. I think really understanding that if I'm going to add something to my list, even my closet, something has to come off. And like, I really internalize that now. I remember hearing that a lot in my like mid-20s in leadership seminars or whatever, but it never felt meaningful or like I could accomplish it. And I just started getting in a pattern of just saying, what's that one thing? And then trying it for a whole week, right? And just noticing that stick and then trying it for another week longer. And not focusing on like 5 things to take off my list, but just getting really good at taking one thing off. And then maybe later I can start adding more things to that list of not to-dos. It hasn't been easy, but really examining the relationships that are serving me. And I say it hasn't been easy because I think the hardest relationships to say I love you and are the ones that did serve you at a certain point and actually gave you gifts, helped you to create things, and also they might have served a place of time. And you can still love on people, but change what that love looks like to step into realizing and living your legacy. So I think that's like I don't know, that's my hard and easy list. Ending in the hard and ending in the hardest, arguably.
Yeah, we've talked about this, but the hype crew you surround yourself with is important. You can't be who you were then. So part of being who you were then is figuring out who then do we have to move away from with a lot of reverence and love and respect, but move into a different reality of possibility, because as you change and your legacy changes, you got to see more. How do I figure out what chooses to be seen in my life over and over and over again?
Yeah. And I don't know, the only last thing I'll say is actually, I think the hardest part of that relationship part was like the relationship with myself. And I'm a lot more comfortable being by myself now than I was, 3 years ago, of being quiet with myself. I'm an extrovert. Recently, I've been wondering if I'm shifting into an introvert, but I love being around people. But I think part of this journey really was figuring out what it meant to love myself and care on myself and be quiet with myself.
What do you think was hard about that? Because I'm like, yeah, sis, I get it.
What I think was hard about it, I would say that, I don't know if you're allowed to curse on this thing, but, probably 90% of it was my own shit, right? And accumulated trauma. And, a combination of like imposter syndrome, of always primarily growing up in white environments and like viewing beauty or brilliance as being different from what I was offering or serving up. I think it was being often the youngest and like brownest person in the room in academic institutions and in workplaces and being loved on and then being a threat. And that like these real things that I don't think we talk about enough publicly as women of color leaders, as Black women leaders. And I think that accumulated for me to just say like, you're not worthy of something. You're specifically not worthy of the same love that you're trying to put out to others, to give that to yourself. Dr. Gail Parker says often, I am worthy of my own care. And that is what I think probably the isolation of the pandemic forced me to realize, was that I am worthy of my own care. And if I'm not caring of myself, no one else is. No one knows how to really love on you. They can be your hype folks to like remind you, right? Or like bring you tea and soup when you're sick. But they might not know really why you're sick.
They don't have all the accumulated storylines. There's only one you. So you're evolving, as we all are, and you're in this phase where you started this conversation with ease. I said, tell me one thing that's bringing you joy. And you said there's some ease right now. What are the nuggets or the benefits that you've realized come with living your legacy?
Joy. There's just like pure satisfaction. Honestly, even when something goes horribly wrong. Like, I just think, it's when you say, I'm here with you for those big public milestones, Gabby. But like now I'm like, sure, like I certainly celebrate them now. I used to never celebrate milestones. And so like that like celebration moment. But it's because I figured out now how to celebrate along the way, and celebrate along the way when we're like, oh, we messed up this. We got to fix this before this, right? Or like, my slip's out. We got to like clean it up. There's just such hyper awareness. Yeah, I think when you're living your legacy, you're awake. And so you notice things differently. And I think when you start to feel the joy, when you start to feel the satisfaction, that awareness like keeps getting like even more and more and more. It gets amplified. And so I would like to think that you just start knowing when this has to end or you need more of this. Like the like routine is built up a lot more. That's what it feels like. You feel pride. I mean, I remember last year constantly, whether it was a funder or a board member or a friend, just being like, how's it going? And I was like, I just feel a lot of pride. And yes, I know the world's on fire, but you can't take away from me what we've built this year and what actually went behind the building. So it is that pride. It is this like healthy level of discomfort of the unknown. Yeah, those are my words.
Yeah, yeah. When you started talking, I smiled because when you've met someone who's living their legacy, you're like, yeah, you're living your legacy. It's different. The energy is different. The light is different. Instead of asking questions that are like generating surface answers, we're actually talking, right? We're connecting. And someone who's living their legacy can also maintain a really uncomfortable conversation for longer. Because you're like, listen, I'm living my legacy. You live yours over there. What a beautiful set of reflections you share with us. The question that everyone is like, here's why I came, is I want to answer this question about the lyric that most align to your legacy. What comes to mind when I ask you that question?
I was like slightly dreading it when I had booked this to record. And then it came so naturally to me when I was like thinking this morning. I'm a Pelotoner, and I was on the Peloton, and in front of our Peloton are all of my father's records. And it's like hundreds of his records. And I immediately was like, oh, this is so simple. The song is Mercy, first played by Cannonball and his quintet in like something like 1966, 1965. And if you know him, which Shauna does, it is a jazz ensemble. That's this rhythmic gospel meets rock meets jazz song. But in the beginning, the record that we have is his live recording, the first recording. And he has this speech in the beginning. Everyone's warming up. And he just keeps saying in many different ways, sometimes you're not prepared for adversity. And he says it like multiple times. Sometimes you're not prepared and you're wondering, what do you do when that takes over? And he's like, you just have it like, dee. So it's not song, it's not lyric, but it's like, dee, dee, dee. And it moves me every time. And it means it's so much more than a song to me. These are my dad's records, which are a part of his legacy and his love. And when I got married, my husband, for like multiple years, had photographed all of these albums of these records, these record albums, and bound them into books for me. And he never met my father. And he wrote this thing. I won't share it because that feels like his privacy. But he wrote, a letter about never meeting him, but when he thought he would be right at the moment of that day. And I remember, as New York was shutting down, we were so scared about what was going to happen. And that was one of the first records, like, we took out and played that song. And it just became that, like, song of the last 4 years that, at least once a month gets cranked up on our record player. Probably at 10 p.m. after some good wine. Sometimes our best friends on our block, Judy and Steve, who are like, sorry, Judy and Steve, they're multiple generations ahead of us. They come and they sit and they listen to it too, and you just see like history. Like you see history unfold. So that is much longer than a lyric of what you wanted, and I'm sorry for crying and talking too long, but it is such a beautiful song. And you should play it and add it to your playlist. I have spoken.
You've spoken. You have been heard. It's a beautiful relationship that we can have with music that can say more than our words. And so thank you for bringing that into the space. And most importantly, for bringing your dad into the space. It's always fun. And I'm sure we'll talk right after this about how it went. And I really appreciate you and my world and in my children's world. And in the world of Black women, and more importantly, in the world of what we will do. So thank you. Can you tell folks where they can find you and make sure you mention the Stillness Ranger?
Oh, obviously. You should first love equally back on Shauna. Shauna really has been, the co-founder of the Highland Project. And just opened my doors and my eyes to what I'm walking in, and I thank you for that. You can find me at the Stillness Ranger on Instagram, which is my wanderings, and doodling in Central Park and more on how nature can heal and help us step into our legacy. You can follow me at Lead Highland on Instagram as well to really see the beautiful work of countless Black women across the country.
Thank you for listening to Legacy, Lyrics, and Life. We hope you'll join us on the next episode as we continue to expand and explore life through legacy. If you know someone else who would enjoy this show, be sure to share. Always a pleasure. Until next time. Hey y'all, you're listening to the Legacy, Lyrics, and Life podcast. I'm your host, Shauna Wells, your legacy architect. And I have the honor of spending time with you thinking about and reflecting on legacy. This is the podcast where we explore what it's like to make decisions every single day to live the legacy that you aim to leave. So I want to start this conversation with a story. I just recently had the opportunity to talk with two folks from my alma mater. I went to University of Vermont. And for those of you that don't know me, I chose to go to the University of Vermont because of a cow. When I was 10, I adopted a cow. Fast forward to high school, I'm sitting across from my guidance counselor, and she says, "What do you know about Vermont?" And I said, "I know I have a cow there that I adopted." And the recognition of Vermont, the love I had for my cow, and me not knowing the answer to the question, what's the legacy I want to leave, attracted me to think about and look at the University of Vermont. So I like to tell people I ended up at the University of Vermont because I adopted a cow and I wanted to follow it. But real talk, when I went to University of Vermont, as you can imagine, I was one of a few Black college students on campus. And it was pretty hard to find my identity and who I wanted to be. And I think I spent a lot of college wandering. I loved University of Vermont. I made friends that I will have for a lifetime, and I love them. And I had a lot of conversations with myself about who I wanted to be, the impact I wanted to make, and how I wanted to show up in the world. So now I'm 40 years young, and I get the honor and privilege of sitting next to and on the board of the University of Vermont's College of Education. So they asked me when I met with them, if you had $1 million to spend, what would you do with it? And you know, that question gave me pause because money is access. It's data for us. It's an opportunity to open up different possibilities. Money does not solve everything, but it sure does make it a little easier. So as they asked the question, all of these possibilities flooded into my head. What came to the top was ultimately what I would do with $1 million if I were spending it on something for the world. I would spend it teaching high school juniors and seniors about legacy. And I would be talking to teachers, about asking questions like, what's the impact you want to make in your life? And who is it that you want to be when you look back over your life 80 years? Those questions are much more profound than what you would envision to be. So my hope, my intent would be to build out a different conversation. To ask them questions that are really
بعد به
rooted
اضافه اینکه لازم موقت میزنید داخل میشه.
That's what I would do. So that was my answer to the question. All of these like great appetizers.
نه همون صنایع نمونه میخواید بدید من یه تستی بکنم.
They were like, great.
الان ببینید شما این لحظه من برم توی کارت
And you know, y'all, when somebody asks you if you want to give money, your
اطلاعاتی برای اشخاص حقوقی خب الان شناسایی ملی شرکت میترمانی هست. سلام
would you put money towards us building a new conversation for children around legacy? It was almost as if I had to filter all of the things in my life and figure out, if I say this is my legacy, do I have the will to put time, energy, and resource behind it? And in this case, resource being money. And
یک
so
کد ملی
the
خودتون
period of what
بفرمایید
I
یه
would
لحظه
say felt
آقای
like
دکتر.
an hour, but was
ساعت
really a
9.
minute. I really had to come to grips with, do I really mean what I say when I say I want my legacy to be the opportunity
نه اونو نگه دارید یه لحظه
to
ببخشید.
open
اون
up new
فعلا
dialogue,
رمز
new
شخصی خودتون رو
conversations
بفرمایید.
around the legacy they aim to leave? Do I really want to do that? And the answer to that question is yes, I do. And now I need to figure out, how do I do it every single day? And is one of those ways to give money towards a thing? Is one of those ways to give energy towards a thing? Is one of those ways to say no to something I'm doing over here so I can say yes to doing something on the other side of my legacy? So the thing I really want us to think about together is what you say you want in terms of your legacy. Is that actually the
منظور
legacy?
شناسی رو فکر
What
کنم
are
همون
the sets of
شناسی ملی رو
decisions,
میگه اونو
of habits,
میفرمایید.
of rituals, of traditions that you do every single day that can make
بله.
space for your legacy to come alive? And when we're able to stop and think about what we do every single day as an
شما میگه
accumulation
شما مجاز ورود به
of a
سامانه
legacy
اطلاع
well
رسانی
lived,
پرونده
then that
اشخاص عمومی
changes
را
things, doesn't
ندارید.
it? That changes all the small things that we do. Like, do I
نه
order
دارم
this
اطلاعات
thing
شما وارد میشم.
off
اطلاعات
of the
خودم که
internet,
نزدم.
have it delivered to my
اجازه
house,
بدید
have
بررسی
it have
کنم
impact
ببینم
on the
این
environment,
مشکل چیه.
and
اگر
say
چیزی به
that I
ذهنم
want to
رسید
build a
خدمت شما
sustainable
تماس
future for our
میگیرم.
children? Do I do both? What tension presents itself when I do both of those things? Do I say I want to be someone who is an abolitionist, who invests in the liberation of Black and brown
اجازه
people,
بدید اکانت
and
خود
at
رو
work silence
نه آقا
voices
اطلاع رسانی
that are
پرونده
political?
فقط از همین
Do I do
مسیره.
those things? Because
مسیر
those two
دیگه
things
ای
are not
نداره.
working in tension.
یعنی
What
باید
I
ما
know
بریم تو
about working
پرونده اشخاص
alongside
بتونیم اطلاعات شدن.
senior
اجازه
leaders
بدید ببینم
is that our
ایراد کار
legacy
کجاست. من
arrives
راه حل
every
پیدا
day.
کردم
It
تا
arrives
انشالله
every
سعی
second.
میکنم
It
این
arrives
یکی دو
every
ساعت
single
دیگه
day.
با شما
And so
تماس
what we
بگیرم.
need are
زنده
tools
باشید
that help
قربان شما.
us make
خواهش
decisions
میکنم خداحافظ.
based on our legacy. So
آقای
here are a
الله
couple of questions that when I'm working
سلام
alongside
خوبه.
my clients, I ask them to ask themselves when they're making decisions in alignment with the legacy that they want to leave.
خب
So
آه
question
خانم
one
خانم
is,
زفی نیست.
what is my legacy and how does it show up here? And that can be like, you can answer that question pretty quickly. When you ask that question to them, remind yourself, what's the legacy I said I wanted? How does what I'm about to do next relate to it? The second question I work with my clients on
این
asking
نیاز
is,
البته بلی سلام
if I say
یه
no to
لحظه
this, what's the impact on my legacy?
آقا جهانگیری سلام.
Because
مخلصم
most of
صحبت
the time,
خوبید
we all try
ارادت
to do
خوش.
too much. And so most of the
سه
time,
تا
we
برای
say,
همون
I have to,
جناب
I
علی آقای
should.
پرنده آقای دکتر.
So I push us to ask the question, if
یه
I said
لحظه
no, what's the
بفرمایید.
impact? And sometimes different
بله.
thoughts emerge, different ways of being emerge when we're faced
یه
with
لحظه.
them. And then the third thing is, would I be able to joyfully live my legacy if I
اوکی شد. بعدی
make this decision? And I want to emphasize a double word that joyfulness. Because again, we often get caught in the shoulds, the woulds, the coulds. And as I've lived this life, and I've lived this life alongside so many senior people, when we make decisions that are rooted in joy, it's just better for everybody. The grumpy dial goes down, the investment dial goes up, and we move from this
خب اینم
state
اوکی
of
شد. آیه
revolution
جهانگیری عزیز بقیه کارم تقریبا اومده است. یکی یکی ابزارشو میگیرم ازتون.
But this is hard now, right? Because every decision every single day accumulates to a legacy. So it's hard, right? Like, because we've got to put some hard thought into the decisions that we make as we move through our lives, down to like, should I buy this t-shirt or not? As I was thinking about this, I was like, what examples do we have of people in modern day stating what their legacy is and then making decisions in alignment with their legacy? And as I was thinking, y'all know, the song pops into my head. I'm sure many of you have heard the song "If I Was President" by Wyclef. He talks about all the things he would do if he were president. He says, if he was president, instead of spending billions on the war, he says, I can use that money so I can feed the poor. Throughout the song, and I'm summarizing here, he talks about how he would reroute funds, time, energy throughout the course of a week to do right by the people in the world. And actually, we see small decisions that Wyclef has made over the course of his lifetime that align to that. He's a proponent for immigrant rights. He gives back to his own Haitian community. He's big in philanthropy and spends his time, energy, and money speaking out against injustice. And yet I wonder if I sat with Wyclef, which one day we went to on the podcast, I sat with Wycliffe and I asked him, do you make decisions on the regular that are in alignment with your legacy? And by regular, I mean every second, every minute of every day. I wonder what he would say to us. So the question that remains for all of us is, what are the decisions that we have control over in alignment with our legacy? And what do we have the
آقا جهانگیری سلام مجدد خوبی؟ آقا ببخشید من هزینه‌دار بسیار دارم میفرستم مال قلیلو بود یه 4 رو آره زدم آره هم شناسه پرداخت برسیم هم مبلغ درود بر شما مرسی خب آقا فهمشید چیه؟
بعد رفتم این کامپیوتر رو گفتم نیومده واسه که گفتم
میاد اسمس بیاد اسمس رو داره ببرد نیومده نداری دیگه
خب من دستم سلام الان چی میخواید ابلاغیاتون رو ببینید باش باش چشم الان ببینم کی بوده؟ شاید تو موقع خراب بوده
این شما سر اشتباه
پس سر من چه کار رفته بود اون درست میگه سر من کلا
میاد پولی میگیره
خب الان یه رمز اومد براتون
شما مثلا
336
من متزلزل شدم
آره خیلی شد دیگه چون ببینید
الان شماره تلفن یه رمز موقت اومد
رفتیم بونگا 240 تا 225 تومن
نه
کم میکنن دوست دارم کم کنم
بذار ببینم اصلا خطتون رو عوض کردید
نه همین شماره رو که دادم آخه ما پول سلام نیست شماره چک باید بدم
نه بذار من یه چیزی بهت بگم صح
گفت 15 کم میکنم بهت میگم
حالا بذار من اول ببینم که صح
حساب دادگاه درسته دادگاه با اجرای احکام دادگاه اومد خونه از من گرفت که نه من قبول کردم 15 رو کم کنیم ولی گفتم که شاید نتونه پولو بده فسخش نوشتم گفتم اگه ندادی تو این تاریخ فسخ میکنم اون سر تاریخ پولو بده من قبول نکردم رفتیم دادگاه این برنده شد اومد 15 هم کم کرد به حساب دادگاه
خب شماره تلفنتون رو بخونید نه اینجا 918 آره دیگه ویرایش کنی ویرایش میکنی بعد به اون به این میاد آره سب کن بذار ویرایش کنم دیگه برات
من رفتم گفتم که این باری قبل از که بگم پوشه تو به درگاه
39 62 72 64 70 سب کن ویرایش کنم
این برای من هم با این داشتم دعوا می‌کردم هم با این که گفتم باید مال من قبول نمی‌کردم که باید مال اینه
خب 918 رو می‌خوام عوض کنم سب کن بذار بنویسمش
درسته
بگو
معاملش درسته مثلا چون خریده بودی شما بر شما این
320
این مالکیت داشته درسته
322
این مالکیت داشته که بتونی بعداً خرید خودت هم اصالت شد
من دیگه تبدیل
حالا من برای حقم داشتم می‌جنگیدم با این دیگه من خریده بودم دیگه خب اینم که سال 93 خریده بود اصلا 10 سال دادگاه
بخشید یه کد میاد خدمتتون
تو 119 رای داد که باید مال اینه 19 پاسپورتی گفته که باید مال اینه خودم رفتم اعلام کردم که باید مال اینه رفتم قولنامه خودم باید مال اینه خب حالا قرار داوی اومده بود باید فروخته به کی به این آقایی که دیروز آورده بودم خب آقای اصلا اومدم دیدم یعنی سر من کلاه گذاشته بود دیگه وسط ترم که چی گفتم این کلاه این کلاه برداره
خریده پولتو نداره
این کلاه برداری کرد یعنی من آتش زد یعنی پول من آتش زد من کلاه برداری کرد ولی خرید مونده این درست نیست درسته
71 699. این دیگه این خط درست شد. این دیگه به اینجا میاد همیشه. این اونجا میرفته 918. خب بس یه کارت بانکی بدید من اینو درست کنم برم سراغ سنا چیزت ابلاغیات.
خب جدا من به نظر نمیگم گلنامه دارم دیگه. حالا این آقا توی خونه داره میشینه الان. خب من فروختم بهش. درسته. سر منم که کلا گذاشته به زور رفته توش نشسته. حالا این خط معامله میخوام بهت بگم. این مرد شده. خب این من در
2206
فروخته به این آقا.
بله. 206.
این ویرایش سنات. تو دوباره خواستم ازت میگیرم.
نقبی چیکار است اصلا؟ نقبی اومده کمک کرده این معادله بفروشه این بخره تو این جریان. من کمک کردم بخره. مدارک کامل می‌دونستم یه دستم رفتم داتا می‌دونستم که این باید این خط معامله درسته. حالا عزتی اومدم رفتم باش وکیل گرفتم از دست این نه از دست کلا ایادی قبل نه ببخشید عزتی تحویل مویز از ایادی این شکایت کرد گفت آقا تحویل مویز محکومشون کرد دادگاه شاهده این خط باید چیز می‌کرد. حالا کار نداشت. آره با وکیل رأی گرفتیم قطعی
خب بخون رمز چیز موبایل تو خط تو 0 620.
حالا اومده میگه مزنمزانی میگه نقبی خونه رو تبانی کرده داده به عزتی. قاضی الان میگه ثمن معامله
0936 517 322
دادن به الان قاضی حق داره این کارو بکنه به ما؟
اثری نداره. ببین ثمن معامله اثری نداره. شما اصلا به معامله بین در واقع آقای قرداغی و اصلانی کار نداشته باشید.
پس میشه یه بار دیگه بخونید؟ میشه یه بار دیگه بخونید؟
شما ببینید به معامله بین سالار واحدی و قرداغی و سالار واحدی نقبی کار داشته باشید. سالار واحدی 2 سال قبل اول زودتر قرداغی و زودتر به نقبی. شما با این کار داری این اصلا ربطی نداره. وقتی این
قاضی چی میگه به ما ولمون نمیکنه میگه ثمن معامله دیروز آقای واحدی بردیم اونجا از دادگاه پرت کرده بیرون برو قضاوت بکش.
چرا به اون ربطی نداره آقا اصلا ربطی نداره. این قسمت رو ولش کن. وقتی این معامله باطل بوده
لایحه یاسی میگه اصلا
فقط اون بگوی توضیح بریم
اصلا من خدا بلیده مثلا
باشه توش هستن
داشتی ها
من موافق هستم
اما الان سمن سوزو میده اصلا لزوم نداره من ذهن اصلا ربطی که اصلا
شما با معامله بین اصلانی فاطمه عزیزی صرف نظر از اینکه
خب این پیامک اومد
نمیدونم واقعی است و فرار از دید است و اصلا اهمیتی نداره ربطی نداره. مهم اینه که قبل از معامله بین آقای سالار واحدی و آقای نقبی چیز بوده باطل بوده. چرا؟ چون آقای سالار واحدی فروش مال غیر کرده. در سال 95 وقت آقای سالار واحدی ملک آقای نقبی می‌فروخته مالک نبوده. چرا؟ چون قبل از اون به معامله رو آقای قرداغی ملک فروخته بوده. تا شما
رأی کیفیت چقدر می‌رسن
یو استمر دو توضیح کار من بیلدیم نوردو
الان من نمی‌دونم
نه من میاد حالا
الان فقط بوده اصلا اونا یه ورود نمی‌کنه.
الان من نمی‌دونم
الان یازرکسم آقا سلام ببخشید سایلنت گوشی متوجه تماس شد. آره الان ارسالش میزنم. زنده باشید ببخشید خدا
الان بود لایحه من نقبی الان پرونده اسمت من شکایت می‌کنم میذارم تو پرونده من دیگه میشتم من روز قاضی دو دیدم که اون
الان من کی را نسبت مدرک هستم. یک فقط اون دادنامه‌ای که معامله بین واحدی و نقبی رو باطل کرده. آیا واحدی به فروش مال غیر محکوم شده است یا نه؟ اینو به من بگو. شده دیگه؟ نیستم پیوسته اصلا ربطی و
بار مونده که الان burada چهار می‌رسن.
burada من این کارت چک پیوسته. کارت وای اینش بودم من دیدم الان از آقای نقبی با اصلا قاضی اشتباهی دید با ورود دید. خب اگر آقا sen bir tane muvaynamı var. Beyin ağayı vahidi nasıl? O tepeyi, o tepe öz değişiyor. Batıl oluyor. Düzlüğü dadlama. İyi baba muamele ağayı bir soranlar yok.
الان فاطمی زد که لایه هفته
Yok sabırla. Gerek aslında her gerek kabul zati la yani.
خب الان اون رو دیم که اصلا برای
Yersen gelesen sabırla. Yani fark eder. Ama ben bunu istiyorum. Ne istiyorum? الان sen bir tane muamele var. Mesela şart olur gerek. Şunu kadar
mesela. Bildim. Menzulu
getireceğim.
الان ikimizin de sözümüz değil.
Sen
mesela
iki tane merhek önemli. Bir muamele gibi yine vahidi ve sen değil. و دادنامه که اون باطره روی فقط بود اتحان فروش مادره
قطع ماده
نود
bu ciddi bu قطع ماده
yok bu نشین گفت آقا bu خطی دیگه sen به عنوان آقای واحدی محکوم لدن فروش مادره یا yok یا آقای رمضانی
محکوم نمیشن بله زندان دادگستری خب دادنامه‌اش رو بریم
هم دادنامه‌اش میگه
نه
من میگم اگه سوزون
bu دادنامه‌اش رو بریم بخونیم
yok bildim nerede الان کلم بخونم
میخواد یه بار روشن خاموش کنید ببین الان اومد الان اومد خب